snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is The Red Knight, which is by Miles Cameron. This is the first in the Traitor Son series by him. Now, a little bit of information about this book. It is his first book published as a fantasy book, so it is a debut in fantasy. However, Miles Cameron is actually a Canadian called Christian Cameron, who writes a lot of historical fiction, and he's got a couple of historical fiction books already out, so it's not his first book. I really enjoyed this book. It was the first book that I read in March, and I really loved it. I felt like it was really well done. The pacing was excellent. It was very well put together. I read this as part of my read-along group, which I will link down below if you want to go and check that out, because we are always reading various different stuff and it's always exciting. But this book was really good, and I just didn't know what to expect going into it. I'd heard a lot of very good things, but not very many people have reviewed it or talked about it, so even though it had very high ratings on Goodreads, I didn't know that much about it. I just knew that my friend Michael liked it and recommended it, so I picked it up. And I'm super happy that I did. If you've not read this book, or if you've not heard of this book, I would highly recommend it, especially if you love big epic fantasies, because it certainly is that. And it's just very well written. So let's get into what this book is all about. Basically, this book focuses on a world where it is the wild with a capital W, versus the man. There are men in this world, human people who live in towns and cities and villages, but there is another force which is called the wild, and the wild essentially is made up of magical creatures of all different types. There are boglins, there are urks, there are various different things. There are trolls, there are worms, and there are wyverns, and there are all sorts of really cool things, and they live in and make up the wild. The wild has been kind of steadily encroaching on the land of the men, and slowly over the years men have dwindled slightly to a lesser force than they were many years ago when they forced the wild back. As we meet the characters of this story, there is a threat from the wild, and it looks as though there may be an oncoming war or battle with the wild to reclaim a certain piece of land. This story focuses largely on a massive cast of characters. There are a lot of characters in this book, but that doesn't mean that you can't get to know them all and see them all as individual and exciting characters, because they all have their own personalities, and I found them very easy to identify once I had read their section a time or two. I definitely feel like one of the things that Miles Cameron is amazing at is certainly characterization and getting to grips with the characters and making them easy, approachable and entertaining to read. I would say if you've never read a sort of big epic fantasy with a large cast of characters, this would be a great place to start, because it's very engaging and very easy to get into. As I say, we focus on a ton of different characters. Some of them I really liked, some were baddies and I really disliked them, but all of them were good in their own way. And one of the main characters obviously is the Red Knight, as the title would suggest. The Red Knight is a very mysterious character. We don't know a whole about him. He is a quite young captain who commands a large band of sellswords. He is hired by the abbess, who is the abbess of Listen Carak, which is the land where her nunnery is. And she hires the Red Knight to come and protect the abbey, because the abbey is closest to the wild and it's the place that's being threatened by the wild. She hires the Red Knight to come and protect the abbey with his bunch of sellswords, and they don't think it's going to be a big deal. They think, okay, we'll come along, we'll defend the abbey, we'll have a few fights with the wild, maybe there's a wyvern or two around that we can kill. But of course it's much bigger than they first anticipated, and it turns into a full-scale battle, siege and all sorts of craziness going on. And I loved it. I said recently in my Dead House Gates review that I don't like battle scenes, and that is true. I don't usually like large-scale battle scenes or sieges, because I find myself skim reading and I find myself a little bit bored. But this book is largely focused on a battle, and I did not find myself even slightly bored, because there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens in between the battle. Even the battle itself is quite interesting in the way that it's fought, because there's magic involved and all sorts of awesomeness. I think this is a really well written book. The world is very well developed in between the battle scenes, such as we see the religion of the world and we see scenes of the magic. We also see characterization and development of our main characters, and I really loved seeing it. It was very emotional. There were some scenes that were very heartfelt and lovely to read about, and there were other scenes that were very brusque and very harsh and showed the reality of their situation, and there were fight scenes and there were duels and there was bloody moments and brutal moments and magical moments, and it definitely had a little bit of everything, so I really enjoyed it. The Red Knight is commanding a bunch of sellswords who are actually all kind of criminals in a way, or a lot of them, and he and his band hire themselves out for various different skirmishes and battles, but when the Abbess calls them, he doesn't realise what he's getting into. The Red Knight himself is actually a very kind and honourable man, although I didn't really know what to think of him at first because he's quite a mysterious character and we don't know his real name, we don't really know his origins. We do get all of these things revealed slowly over the course of the book, and I felt like it was really well done. He's a really interesting character, and you never really know exactly where you stand with him, and you never really know the true extent of his power over his people and over himself. He's also a very fair character, as he employs not only men in his band but also women, and he's very much upholding the rules and very strict on men who want to do terrible things and stuff like that, so he's a really great character. He has no toleration of people acting up under his reputation. I just found him to be a character who really steadily grew across the story into a really excellent one, and I certainly enjoyed his character. By the end of the book he was one of my favourites, and I was always looking out for his sections because they were the most action-packed and he was right in the middle of everything. I definitely was rooting for him by the end. Next we have the Abbess, who, as I mentioned before, is a major character. She is at the head of the nunnery, obviously. She's a very mysterious character as well. We always get the sense that there is something she's holding back, and she might have a few secrets and she might have a few mysteries that she's not really willing to share with us. It certainly seems like she has an interesting past and backstory, and as you go through the book you discover this is definitely true. One element that I really enjoyed about her personality was her intelligence and the way that she and the Red Knight had a kind of ongoing banter and intelligence and witticism battle, and I really loved it. They both like to banter and tease one another quite a lot, even though they're in the middle of this horrible situation with the Wild. They are actually both quite entertaining characters, and I do really enjoy seeing them spar verbally with one another. Amicia is a novice at the Abbey who we focus on, and she is quite interesting because she instantly draws the attention of not only the Red Knight but various other people in the nunnery as well. She's fairly quiet and she's quite a calm character, but as we go through the book we discover more about her past as well, and she definitely becomes one of the most intriguing characters by the end of the book. I felt like her story was really good by the end, and I really want to know more about her. I also liked seeing Harmodius, who is another character. He is actually the king's mage, which means that he is magical, and when we meet him he's doing some really interesting experiments with magic, and he's kind of pushing the limits, testing what is really okay to do and what can be done. We learn a lot of the magic in this world from Harmodius. He's quite a knowledgeable and clever character, and he really imparts a lot of wisdom on some of the other characters who are younger than him and don't really understand the full extent of their potential. He's very good at imparting knowledge and wisdom in a non-condescending way and just being a really reliable and good source of information. I also just love the fact that he was powerful and he was a strong adversary to the enemy, and generally he was just a really engaging character. He starts off with his storyline in the palace, and as it goes on he becomes more and more integral to the plot, and I really enjoyed that. The Red Knight's squire is called Michael. Michael is a really sweet character. He's certainly one who I felt was lovable and enjoyable to read about. He has high aspirations, but he has broken away from his family, and therefore that's why he is starting as a squire, and he's not really got any massive connections to his family anymore. He really cares about his master, and he's very loyal, he's very loving. He wants to do his best in order to become what he aspires to be, which is a knight. I certainly connected with him more easily than some of the other characters who are a bit nastier, but he was really great to read about, and he keeps a diary at some points of this book as well, which was quite interesting to see. Thorn is a really interesting character. He is essentially the enemy of this book, and he has a lot of really crazy stuff that goes on with him. We don't know a lot about his past, but again it is stuff we figure out as it goes on, and we don't really know his origins, we don't really know his aims, and he is the one who is kind of driving things, or that's what we believe, and he's the one who has a lot of magic to him. He's very powerful. He has a lot of very scary goals. He doesn't really care about the repercussions, and he doesn't really care about upsetting anyone, focused solely on what he wants to do. He was awesome in that he was very powerful, and he was inspiring to the creatures of the wild. He was also a very dominant and terrifying character at times, and he certainly has his moments of rage. He's a very, very powerful and worthy adversary, which I liked because there are a lot of books where the enemy isn't as awesome and crazy as you would like them to be, because it makes it a bit easy for the main character to defeat them. This book, he was pretty badass. He was definitely powerful, and I didn't know if they were going to be able to take him on. He was an excellent bad guy, essentially. We also get glimpses of other people around the kingdom, some more than others. For example, the king and the queen of the kingdom, they come into play a little bit, and I felt myself drawn more to the queen because she had larger sections, and she was also a very interesting character. She's quite a nice character, but she does have harsh words to anyone who she feels is not really doing the right thing. She's very commanding, she knows her role and she plays it very well, and she knows exactly how beautiful and lovely she is and what she can achieve with that beauty and favours. I found her personality to be really quite brusque when you first meet her, but there's actually a lot of depth there when you delve into her, and when she is forced to help with the efforts to stop the wild, she's really a very, very good queen who does care a lot about her kingdom. The king equally cares very much for his kingdom, but he didn't feature as much as the queen, so I didn't really feel like he was as essential to the plot or as engaging as the queen. But he is another character who we do see some of. Jean Disraeli is another character who is actually not part of the kingdom. He comes from the east. He and his cousin are journeying into the kingdom. He believes that he is the best knight in the world and that he should be the king. And he and his cousin don't really know the customs of the world because they are from the east. They don't really understand what is okay to do and what is not, so they are constantly doing the wrong thing and leaving a trail of madness and chaos in their wake. I certainly felt like Jean Disraeli was a bit of a twat at times. I didn't feel like he was the nicest guy. He didn't really have a consideration for many other people's points of view other than his own, but I felt like he did have some redeeming moments in the story as well, and he was still a really interesting character whose plot I always liked to see, even if I didn't necessarily love his character all the way through. Jean in particular is very easy to anger and he's very quick to fight, and he also believes that he is being guided by a divine being or an angel, so he is quite adamant and stubborn in what he thinks he is destined to do. Peter is a young boy who we meet in the kingdom. He is a quite interesting character because of the situation he finds himself in. He actually gets separated from the group he is with and ends up joining a completely different culture called the Sosag, who are actually kind of men who live in the wild. Peter is right in the midst of everything, of all of the battling, but he's not really a major player and he doesn't see a whole lot of the action. He just sort of sees this culture and immerses himself in it, and he finds himself in some quite tricky situations because of not knowing the culture and not knowing the rules, so he has to adapt and try and blend in with their customs and their ways. I liked learning a bit more about his situation as the book went on and what he had to do in order to fit in and the sacrifices he was prepared to make in order to join in with this clan. I definitely feel like he is one to watch. I feel like he's got a great potential and could be a really interesting character as the story goes on. There are various other points of view as well, but if I listed them all I would be going all day because there are lots, but I do think they are all individual and they are all exciting in their own way. I didn't have any characters whose point of view I got to and was like, oh no. All of them were entertaining, all of them were engaging, all of them were individual, and I liked all of them. They all have their own plot lines, they all have their own actions and thoughts and incentives, and I like that a lot. I definitely think that this book is excellent at dealing with characters and making them believable, realistic and entertaining. In terms of the world and the magic, the creatures of this world were certainly original. There were some I'd never heard of and some who I had, but it was all entertaining. The story is largely focused on the battle between man and the wild, but that doesn't mean that it's all crazy fighting with arrows and all sorts of things. There are many scenes where we learn about the characters, where we learn about their pasts, where we learn about the different cultures of the world, where we learn about the religion, which is quite similar to Christianity, and various other features come into play, and I really loved seeing that. Also, it's brilliantly paced. I felt like there was always something going on, always something entertaining to read about, even if it wasn't necessarily a crazy battle that was happening and we were just seeing a smaller point of view. I definitely felt like it was a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery, a lot of awesome stuff always was going on in this book, and it felt really engaging. I didn't want to put this book down when I was reading it. I constantly wanted to just pick it up and see what was going to happen and see where our characters were going to end up. and I really enjoyed it. Plus, I listened to this mostly on audiobook because I was doing a lot of work at the time, and I tend to love listening to audiobooks when I'm working, so I really, really would recommend the audiobook of this. If you are into audiobooks, this audiobook and the narration of it is really, really good. On the whole, I would really, really highly recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it gets enough credit. I don't think it gets enough recognition or hype because it is well worth a lot more. And I really, really would recommend this, especially if you are into epic fantasy. It's very engaging, as I keep saying. I really loved it. I don't know what else to say because it was a really, really good book, and I will definitely be continuing on with the series. I believe it is going to be a 5-book series. At the moment, the first 2 are out, but the third one is coming out sometime later this year, so I'll definitely be picking that one up, and I already have the second waiting for me to pick it up. I will certainly be continuing on. I would highly recommend this book. I would love to know your thoughts if you've read it or if you want to read it, so leave me comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat about the